Hello. We're back. I'm here. Good to be here once again. This is HEYS Reviews Lives, episode number 7. Follow the white Labcoats. Thank God you arrived. Welcome to the party, and hold on to your butts. This episode is going to be huge. It's going to be epic. It's going to be enormous. I'm really going to try and keep this condensed and down to be a sub 2-hour episode, but I've got so much stuff that I want to get through and share with you and talk to you about. And when it came to putting this episode together, there was just almost too much stuff to include. So I've got news articles, I have got book recommendations, I've even got a film recommendation, and I've got some comedy, very importantly. This is kind of a heavy episode, but it's an extremely important one, and what we're going to be doing is talking about the white Labcoats. So I've called it Follow the White Labcoats. It's a reference to Alice in Wonderland, where Alice is told to follow the white rabbit, and this metaphor or image of the white rabbit has been used extensively. For example, it's used in the Matrix film. Neo gets told to wake up and follow the white rabbit. And it's used all over the place. It's a really, really common image and symbol. And so what's it all about? Well, if there's a white rabbit and you're told to follow it and you're not told where it's going and you're not told what the white rabbit is doing and you're just told to follow it, then you either do or you do not follow it. And if you choose to follow it, then you're following it on faith. You are following it on maybe instinct. You believe that it's the right thing to do and that it's going to take you to where you need to go, even though you might not know where that place is or have any idea why. You just believe and you just have faith. And that's really what this whole episode is about. It's about the white lab coats that we have so much faith and belief in, and asking the question, are we right to put our faith and belief in these white lab coats? So, without any further messing around or preamble from yours truly, let's have a look at the first article that we have today. So this is the Mail Online, and the Mail Online has published this in its health section. There is no such thing as the science. This is the headline. Sir Patrick Vallance tells COVID inquiry ministers were completely wrong to hide behind the term following the science during the pandemic. So this is Sir Patrick Vallance. He is number 10's former top scientist, and he kept a diary during the pandemic. Good thing to do, keep a diary, keep a journal, record your thoughts and your ideas and your experiences, and make a record of what's going on. In this day and age, people used to do this all the time. They would write down what was going on in their lives, and then they would pass it on to their children and their ancestors, and we would have this unique insight into what was going on for them in their lives and what the times were like and the challenges they were facing and the things they were going through. So it's good that he kept this diary, but he had no intention of publishing it. So there's a bit of consideration there that this is not a piece of spin, it's not a piece of propaganda, we are told. It's just his personal recollections and his experiences, and it says here that he kept this diary just to decompress, just to give himself, just to offload some pressure, because obviously it was a very stressful time for people who were in his position and trying to work on protecting everybody. So, he had no intention of his notes ever seeing the light of day. Addressing the COVID inquiry, number 10's ex-chief scientific advisor argued, there is no such thing as the science because it is a moving body of knowledge. And I highlighted this one. It's extremely important to realize that, yes, science, and I said this in a previous episode, it is not fixed. It is not, there is no, it's never finished. It's an ongoing, iterative process that you do. And we were told all the way through these events, follow the science, believe in the science, trust in the science. And that's not it. You do science. And then you continually question the conclusions that science spits out and that you come to. The whole point of it is to rigorously test and retest the conclusions. And so he's absolutely right here. And this was a little nugget thrown in that I think people need to be aware of and pay attention to. It's a moving body of knowledge. So it's always ongoing and is never fixed in one place. So he says that he can also agree that there is no such thing as the science. Science, by its definition, is a moving body of knowledge that tries to overturn things by testing the whole time. Now, when you realize this and you start looking into the way people live and the things they talk about and what they say, you realize that there's a lot of theories out there which are treated as though they are completely factual and real and proven. We might get onto that a little bit in this episode, but keep an eye out for this word theory, because a theory is not a fact. A theory is just something that has been put out there as a possible explanation, but it might not have been completely proven. Yet we are sort of misled to believe that it is an absolutely scientifically established fact when there is very much not a consensus on certain things. But he was we learn in this article that there were revelations that ex-PM Boris Johnson once described the corona as nature's way of dealing with old people, which is a little bit callous and a little bit harsh. None of the old people in my life were taken out by this. I didn't actually know of or meet any old people who were dealt with by nature in this way. So it was a kind of inaccurate thing to say as well, and also very callous and cruel. And I think the truth is that the measures put in place were responsible for way more death and harm amongst the elderly population than any alleged novel virus ever was. So we go further down in the article, and they're talking a little bit about Matt Hancock. He was the health secretary throughout the whole lockdown fiasco, and he's offered his account of the pandemic in a book called The Pandemic Diaries. I would encourage anyone to not bother wasting money on that, and I've got a much better resource that I'll give to you that you can get for free later on in this episode. But I just wanted to highlight that there because they're trying to rewrite the story and rewrite the narrative. Now that the dust has settled and we're a bit further on from it, there'll be a really strong effort to crystallize the official narrative in the history books as a certain story which leaves things out or neglects to mention certain important parts of what actually happened. And Matt Hancock's book, which I bet he didn't write, somebody will have been paid to ghostwrite this, no doubt. But that is the function of this kind of book. It's to be a brick in the building of what is the official narrative. So it's important to be aware of these things. And I would like to humbly suggest that people check out other non-mainstream books that are written by independent researchers and journalists who are not funded by the government. So further down the article, there's just some quotes here, and apparently Mr. Johnson was obsessed with older people accepting their fate and letting the young get on with life and the economy going. I think this quote is thrown in there to drum up some how could he say such a thing? What an evil man to say such a thing. Well, no, I believe that many old people would agree with him on this. I think I talked to a lot of old people who said this, all this is being done in our name, and it is ridiculous. Those who weren't terrified, those who had belief and faith in their health and their well-being, and they had lived long enough to know not to trust everything on television, were saying it's really the young people who are getting harmed by all this, and it's unfair to force everybody to suffer and struggle and sacrifice so much in the name of the elderly. Now, I'm not saying I agree with throwing any group of people under the bus, obviously not. But you've got to watch out for people doing things with stated good intentions. Oh, it's for the benefit of this group, or it's for the protection in the name of this group over here. Like I've said so many times, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and often tyranny and authoritarianism is a fist inside a velvet glove. It's always done for the right reasons, for the greater good, for the benefit of the community, for the benefit of people who don't want it to be done in their name. And if you ask them, are you happy with this? Are you comfortable with this? Do you want this doing in your name? They'll say, no, we don't. So Sir Patrick and his pandemic diary, he's objecting to it being published, which, it's a private document. He didn't write it to be shared out. So he has a right to not have it sent out for everybody to scrutinize and look at. But Baroness Heather Hallett has yet to make a decision on whether his entries should be disclosed in their entirety. And there's a few extracts down here which are quite telling. So in June 2020, he's written, the government selected from SAGE what it wanted. So the SAGE is an advisory group, SAGE. And he's saying here that the government were selecting the information that it wanted that would back up the things it wanted to do. He's written here that they've just been cherry picked. So cherry picking is just when you pick the evidence that supports your thesis, your conclusion, and you leave out the stuff that contradicts it or challenges it. He's written here that some person has completely rewritten the science advice as though it's the definitive version. He also wrote there was lots of flip-flopping and bipolar decision making. So this is kind of all understandable. I think it's all it was an emergency. The people trying to handle this and lead the response were told that they were millions and millions of billions and billions of lives were at risk and nobody was safe. But I think as we all watched it unfold, we realized that actually most people were safe. And the data supported that. And there were voices very early on pointing that out who were silenced and deplatformed and victimized and shut down. And that is because the government, the people running this thing, or the response to it at least, they saw an opportunity because we should never let a good crisis go to waste. And so an opportunity was here. And whether it was allowed to happen or whether it was manufactured, that is not the topic of today's conversation. But what I did want to highlight here is that things being done in the name of science and for science and because of science and believe in it, trust in it, follow it, can lead to extremely bad outcomes. And let's see, we'll move on and see what some of those outcomes are. So on top of the government's own white coat boffins coming out and saying that there was flip-flopping and bipolar decision-making and cherry-picking going on, the Mail also reports in the news that ministers accused of a cover-up, as it is revealed, shadowy army unit did spy on British critics of COVID lockdown policies. So it was happening. A shadowy army unit. And this is a release of new documents which contradict official assertions that the army unit had only been monitoring foreign powers. So this is a recent story. It's 25th of November. Ministers were accused of a cover-up last night after it was revealed that soldiers did secretly spy on British critics of the government's response to COVID. The release of new documents contradict official assertions that a shadowy army unit had only been monitoring foreign powers. Yeah. So this has been the pattern, particularly since 2001 in America, and we've been seeing it happen here for longer and longer, is all these powers that our so-called elected leaders grant themselves and always end up being turned inwards and on the domestic population. So in England, we are experiencing an unprecedented level of CCTV. We're all on camera all the time. Now we've all got cameras in our homes, in our pockets at all times, recording us and monitoring what we say. Every interaction, for the most part, is mediated by technology, which allows entities to collect and gather all that information and use it to build up profiles and pictures on us and either use targeted marketing and advertising to sell us things, or they can use it for more sinister purposes, as I covered in a previous episode, which was about debanking and how people are getting their access to banking and their money taken from them because of their political views. So this is another mainstream article telling us about another unacceptable opinion that you are not allowed to hold, and that is being critical of lockdown policies. And they've been trying to cover it up. So documents obtained by the civil liberties group Big Brother Watch revealed the government cells included the MOD's 77th Brigade, which deploys non-lethal engagement and legitimate non-military levers as a means to adapt behaviors of adversaries. So remember this, 77th Brigade. They are adapting behaviors of adversaries. So what does that mean? Non-lethal engagement and legitimate non-military levers. Well, this is things like propaganda. This is things like mind control, nudging, the nudge unit. That's a group of psychologists employed by the government to mold and manipulate our behaviors without our fully informed consent and nudge us towards the desired or correct behavior that they want us to do. So that's what non-lethal engagement and legitimate non-military levers are. You know, instead of kicking down your door, whacking you around the head with the butt of their gun and telling and screaming at you to do something, instead of that overt out in the open way. They're using data collection and technology and repetition of messages and divide and conquer tactics that are psychological in nature. And we're going to come on to a key book which explains how this works very shortly. But moving on with the article, new information unearthed by Big Brother Watch showed the 77th Brigade did produce reports on those who questioned government decision-making and even compiled notes on BBC's Question Time. The soldiers also filed newspaper articles and tweets made by politicians regarding Number 10's rejection of an international ventilation scheme in March 2020 under the label disinformation, which could have a negative effect on the UK's reputation. So that's the classic modal verb could. It could have a negative effect, but how likely is that negative effect? 1%, 2%, 0.1%. You know, the coronavirus could kill people. How likely is it? Or is it 1%, 5%, 10%, 0.0012%? So this is how they manipulate people and drum up some fear by saying a thing could happen without giving you the actual statistical likelihood and probability of that thing happening. So you're just in fear with no idea whether or not your fear response is proportionate to the actual risk which exists. Commonplace, absolutely commonplace. So obtained after a months-long freedom of information battle with the Cabinet Office, the documents show personnel from the Information Warfare Unit dedicated time to managing the government's reputation rather than tackling foreign threats, such as analysing the response to fines for breaching lockdown on social media. So it takes months for people, for the public, for groups that are trying to push transparency and promote openness. It takes months to get this information from the Cabinet Office, and you have to battle for it. So that is put there as well deliberately to make you feel like, well, what's the point? I can't be bothered. I don't have time. I've got other things to worry about. It's a battle. It's hard. It's going to take up energy. It plants that seed that is not worth doing, not worth the hassle. So a lot of people won't bother trying to hold the government to account with freedom of information requests, even though they have a right to do that. But the government and the people in this information warfare unit were tracking and analyzing people's responses in real time. The article goes on to say, free press and free speech are the foundations of any democracy, yet journalists and politicians appear to be treated like the enemy within. Politicians and journalists, in many ways and in many cases, are the enemy within because they are employed and by the establishment. And the establishment, as I said, is turning their powers more and more on their domestic populations to curtail freedoms, to manipulate and control, bring down standard of living, bring down the ability to live healthily, to run businesses, to operate outside of being completely dependent on the system. And this was this whole event, this whole lockdown situation, I think, was a huge data gathering exercise where these kind of military operations and in league with the government could see, all right, who's going to go along with what the television tells them to do and who's going to ask some questions. And that was probably the most useful data that they managed to gather. Who will obey the TV and who will say, hang on a second, I want to know more before I jump both feet first into this narrative and accept it as being true and real. But at the end, what it says is they did not target individuals or take any action that could impact anyone's ability to discuss and debate issues freely. So that's good then. Not yet, I think, is the key thing to bear in mind there. They're gathering information, they're gathering intel, and they're trying to find out, all right, who's going to cause a problem, who has analytical thinking and a loud voice and the ability to influence hearts and minds, to speak publicly, to put their name to their opinions, and to lead the way in questioning and demanding more transparency. They want to analyze those people, find out who they are, and get rid of them before the next event, obviously. So, moving on to the Daily Skeptic, this next article is about Moderna. So it's not only the government and the 77th Brigade and their shadowy nudge unit type psychologists who are gathering information and trying to find out what we're up to, and so they can manipulate us, but it's also Moderna as well. Just bear with me a moment. I'm full of a cold today, and I'm trying not to give you the pleasure of listening to me snotting and coughing. But yeah, the Daily Skeptic has published this article, Moderna is spying on you. Who are Moderna? Well, they are the manufacturers of the injections. This is what they like to do. They like to manufacture things that get injected into people using syringes. So it's kind of a bonkers business model, but as we've talked about before, there is not huge demand for it, not from the population, not from the people who it's being given to and used on, but from the people who invest in this company. This company is extremely important. If you look at the history of this company, they've never managed to successfully bring any product to market ever until there was a top-down emergency situation, and their product was backed by massive amounts of investors and rolled out under an emergency use situation, which allowed it to hasten the production and skip the usual testing methods and procedures to get it to market quickly. And it was granted all sorts of protections, and you should really look into it. No, not you should, sorry, but it's good to know before you accept products. Well, who funds the company that produces them, and what's the history, and have they been successful before, or have they been embroiled in all sorts of lawsuits and accusations of misconduct? In the case of Moderna, it's extremely shady, and they've had their products really, as we'll find out later, really kind of what's the word that I'm looking for? The alarm bells are being rung. Let's put it that way. But it's hard to find that information if you are only hanging out in the mainstream. It's getting easier, but it is still tricky. But Daily Skeptic is telling us about an excellent new investigative piece for Unheard, where Lee Fang and Jack Paulson expose the behind-the-scenes machinations of COVID vaccine maker Moderna to shape and censor the public debate around the jabs. Here's an excerpt. Excuse me a second. I'm going to sneeze. So behind the scenes, the marketing arm of the company has been working with former law enforcement officials and public health officials to monitor and influence the policy around the injections. They've been trying to confront the root cause of injection hesitancy by rapidly identifying and shutting down misinformation. All right. 1, injection hesitancy. This phrase on itself has baked into it that these injections are all good, they're all fun. It's like being it's like being water hesitant. Like you're hesitant about something that's obviously good for you, and all we need to do is just give you a pat on the head and boost your confidence a little bit, and you can do it. Go on, you can do it. You're just hesitant, but it's all right. It's not hesitancy that they're going up against. It's like actual thinking people who look into the data and the history of this medical intervention, and they see that there's all sorts of things wrong with it. There's all sorts of times where companies are harming people and experimenting on people and not being held to account. And when you start looking into the history of this, you don't become hesitant. You become extremely well-informed to make a decision. And then you decide for yourself that I realize that this is not how health works. Health is not in a syringe. It's not delivered via syringes. For most cases, for most people. There's obviously exceptions. But in this case, they try to push it on most cases, most people, everybody. Everybody needs it, young, old, any age. And that's just not the way health works. And so they're trying to shut down misinformation. Well, who decides what misinformation is? Who decides what disinformation is? They're not trying to shut down false information. They're not trying to shut down lies. They're not trying to shut down contradictions, logical contradictions. No, it's just misinformation. So the word misinformation doesn't necessarily mean something that is false or untrue or fake news. Misinformation, it just means the wrong information. It just means the information they don't want you to look at, they don't want you to see, and they don't want you to be aware of. It's the information that they don't want you to factor into your decision making. It's misinformation. So again, that's another key word to hone in on. In many ways, we are told the truth, and most people will assume that misinformation means falsities, but not necessarily. So there's a network of 45,000 healthcare professionals that were given talking points and advice on how to respond with when injection misinformation goes mainstream. So they're training people and they're giving them, here, say this. And they're telling them, they're giving them a script. And as I've said before, and I will continue to say, pretty much everybody that you ever see on the mainstream is reading from a script. It might not be a script that is word for word, but it's a talking point. It's like, stick to this and say that, and here's your key phrase, and repeat that. And then they'll just work around it and they'll kind of ad-lib it. But this is what happens. People are given scripts to read. And if they're on your television, chances are 99% of them are reading from a script that is written by somebody else. And they're there on your television because they're good at reading scripts. And that's the only reason. So Moderna's disinformation arm aimed at shutting down anything that might undermine CV-19 related policies. So aimed it at anything. That just means like valid criticism, valid questions, valid data. Shut it down because it undermines the policy. Right? They're not worried about whether or not the policy is correct and making it absolutely rock solid. They're not worried about bolstering the policy in terms of effectiveness and truth. What they want to do is they've picked a policy and now we have to stick with that and we have to shut down anything that might undermine it. So that just ends up people who approach the situation with love, with care, with compassion, because they want the best and they want a better outcome for everybody involved. Those people get shut down if their findings and their questions and their conclusions undermined the policy. You see how that works right there? Shut them down. So with PGP, Moderna is monitoring a huge range of mainstream outlets as well as unconventional ones. So this was interesting. I didn't know this. They're monitoring the Steam online gaming community and the website Medium. So online gaming communities are even being scrutinized, and they do a lot of talking because they play games together and they have headsets and they communicate over their mics. So that's a huge data source, and they're even monitoring that. It has nothing to do with medicine, healthcare. In fact, that's a place where people would go to escape all that, try and have a bit of downtime and a bit of R&R. But even there, you're being tracked and monitored and recorded to check that you are not committing wrongthink. Moderna also retains TalkWalker, which uses its Blue Silk artificial intelligence to monitor injection-related conversations across 150 million websites in 200 countries. So they're really casting the net wide to find out how to shut down anybody who raises concerns about the product that they are bringing to market. So their monitoring team includes Moderna's Global Intelligence Division, which is run by Nikki Ruttman, who spent 20 years as an analyst with the FBI. She is among many former law enforcement agents now with the injection maker. So we talked about in a previous video the revolving door at the very top of the pyramid, military industrial complex, pharmaceutical complex, media companies, banking, politics. I added media companies because previously when I talked about this, I only had those four. But it's newspapers and media companies, Hollywood companies, production companies. And people just move between these industries. And that is how the cohesion amongst all of them is created, and how they are all legs of the same table. And there's actually any sort of conflict that might appear to be happening is all manufactured and staged, because the way people are defanged, the way people's power is taken away from them, is to give them two teams and have them blame the other team, right, for their problems. When actually it is the small team of people at the very, very top of all the industries that I just named cooperating with each other to do whatever it is that they want to do, protect their own interests at the expense of the majority. But here we find out Moderna is employing FBI information analysts, and they are spying on 150 million websites in 200 countries. So does that really sound like a benevolent pharmaceutical product maker who just wants the good outcome, who just cares about you and your health and the health of your loved ones and your friends and family? Does that sound like something that people who care about you would actually need to do? Spy on everyone who criticizes their product in order to shut them down? I mean, if you have confidence and belief in your product, you would welcome criticism, because every criticism is going to make you stronger. It's either your product is good, so either their criticism is stupid and false and will be ignored and will be ineffective at harming your reputation or your product, your profits, or the criticism will be valid and it will help you identify a weakness in your product and you can make it even better. So a business with integrity and excellence will welcome open discussion, open debate, transparency, and criticism of their product and or service for that reason. This is not what Moderna is doing, and therefore Moderna is not a company that has integrity and excellence. They are just shutting people down. And they're producing these reports. According to one report we have seen, the article says, Musk was deemed to be high risk, specifically a video that ridiculed media and government officials who claimed that the CV19 injection was 100% effective against the virus. The report did not identify any false statements. So this is the report produced by Moderna claiming that Musk is high risk. It actually didn't identify any false statements, because this effort is not about identifying lies. It's about identifying who threatens the narrative we want to push out there to people, who has better talking points, who has difficult questions to ask, and who is capable of speaking publicly in a way that wins hearts and minds and might turn them against us and affect our bottom line. And then crucially, at the very end of the article, none of the reports that we have seen makes any attempt to dispute the claims made. Rather, and this is the claims of their so-called critics or so-called high-risk targets who might promote injection hesitancy. None of the reports tried to dispute the claims. Rather, the claims are automatically deemed misinformation if they encourage injection hesitancy. So that's it right there. It's not about truth or false. It should be about truth, but it's not. It's about marketing and advertising and manipulating public opinion and shutting down anybody who tries to arm you with informed consent and who tries to arm you with good questions to ask, with sensible observations, with rational, reasonable lines of inquiry things that you should be asking and thinking about before you accept any medical intervention. But they don't want you to ask these questions. They don't want you to find this out because they just want you, all they want you to do is follow the white lab coats. Now you're seeing where I got the name for this episode. Let us move on. We have got a lot to get through and I'm going too slow. Okay, this one is, I'm not going to go deep into this. This is the Disinformation Chronicle. It's a Substack and it is a 30-minute read. It is an epic, long, detailed, deep dive into data and information and disinformation specifically. So we're now being, these terms, misinformation and disinformation and malinformation, they're being weaponized and they're being used to turn you off learning, because people who are well educated and people who are very keen on learning for themselves what things mean and what the truth is, they're dangerous. And they're dangerous in the eyes of the controllers and the people who would like to keep their control and their wealth and protect their power. As George Carlin famously said, they don't want a nation of clear thinking, rational, well-informed readers. They don't want that. They want you all to be staring at 30-second long TikToks, ruining your attention span, and being absolutely unable to tell your arse from your elbow. And just as a side note, I was thinking about this term the other day, and I was like, well, luckily for you, I've spent a lot of time analyzing, and then I just stopped myself because I realized I was going to say, I've spent a lot of time analyzing arses and elbows. But so that didn't really work. But I just thought it was funny. But no, I don't analyze arses and elbows, but I do try to listen to people who are good at telling them apart. And this is one of those articles which is going to help you do that. And it gives you a history of influence, scandal, and denial. So this is transparency and financial conflict of interest in science and medicine. So I'll just read a little bit from the intro, and then I'll put this in the show notes for you to go and read and peruse at your leisure. But it tells us about in December 1953. So we're going back in time 70 years. Exactly. Oh my, look at that. Exactly 70 years ago. That is well-timed and very synchronistic. The CEOs of America's leading tobacco companies cast aside competitive rancor and gathered at New York City's Plaza Hotel to confront a menace to their incredibly profitable industry. An emergent body of science published in elite medical journals cast doubt on the safety of cigarettes and threatened to destroy half-century of corporate success. Joining them at the Plaza was John W. Hill, the president of America's top public relations firm, Hill & Knowlton. Hill would later prove a decisive savior. Hill had closely studied Edward Bernays. Now, I just want to pause there and say, remember, you got to know that name. That name, Edward Bernays, is one of the most important critical names. You have to know who he is. And I'll come on to why in a minute. But this guy, Hill, John Hill, who was hired by the cigarette tobacco companies, had studied Edward Bernays, whose work on propaganda in the 1920s and 30s laid the foundation of modern public relations and defined common techniques to manipulate popular opinion. So Hill learned that effective public relations required comprehensive offstage management of the media. Comprehensive offstage management of the media. That sounds like what we just read Moderna is doing, right? Moderna is handing out talking points to the right people. It is monitoring everything that is being said on millions of websites all over the world in 200 countries. So that is a lot of offstage management they're engaged in. Prior to that, we were hearing about the UK government who have got their own 77th Brigade, spying on people, compiling lists and gathering data about people who are asking questions that they do not want us to ask. Anyway, moving on with this article. So we've got John Hill, and he is putting to work Edward Bernays' public relations methodology. And the problem was that the tobacco companies are like, oh gosh, there's all this evidence, there's all this annoying, inconvenient evidence that says our product is dangerous. What are we going to do about it? And Hill proposed, instead of ignoring or denigrating new data that found it dangerous, Hill proposed the opposite. Embrace science, trumpet new data, and demand more, not less, research. By calling for more research, which they would then fund, tobacco companies could harness academic scientists in a battle to confront a major scientific controversy and amplify skeptical views of the relationship between tobacco and disease. Such a scheme would let companies shroud themselves in doubt and uncertainty, core principles of the scientific process, in which every answer leads to new questions. So, what is the relevance of this story? Well, this is exactly what's going on today with the injection industry. With every industry, in fact, you can pay to get people to carry out a study which will give you the outcome and the conclusion that you already want. You've already decided the conclusion you want, and then you get, right, I'm going to give this group of scientists here, look, I'm going to pay you to do this study, and I want this study to show cigarettes are good. And then you do that, and you release all that research, so-called research, into the market, and then people don't know what to believe. And you hear it all the time. People are, oh, well, there's a study, you can find a study that shows anything these days. Yeah, that's absolutely true, and this is the reason why. Not all studies are going to be created equal. Some of them are going to have massive amounts of funding behind them from people who have conflicts of interest. So, really critical article. I would love people to get in here and read even more about it. And it goes on. It's very detailed, as I showed you. But I think that paints a picture of what it's about, and it's a good example to bear in mind when you're making decisions about your health. Who has funded this research, and who stands to benefit from the massive rollout of this product and the forcing of this product onto as many people as possible? Where's that money for that? Exchanging hands, as they often say, follow the money. But Edward Bernays is a guy you got to get on your radar, and a name you have to become familiar with, in my opinion. And to help you do that, I've found here a PDF copy, which I'll link below, of Propaganda, which is Edward Bernays' book, published in 1928 by Horace Liverwright, printed in the United States. Zoom in a little bit. So first printing 1928, and then it was reprinted 5 times between 1928 and 1936, and this is the 5th printing, or a scan of the 5th printing. Excuse me a second, I need to clear my throat. And so, again, we don't need to delve too deep into this book to find out the key information. But the contents page here, you can see that he's talking about organizing chaos, right? There's the new propaganda, the new propagandists, and Chapter 4 tells us a lot, the psychology of public relations. So propaganda is really a tool to use to manipulate the psychology of people. What are people thinking? And psychology and thoughts and opinions and beliefs drive behavior. So they're trying to get in at that level, at the root of where behavior comes from, because the ultimate goal is to get people to behave a certain way. And this is used, according to Bernays, in business, political leadership, women's activities, education, social services, art, and science. So everywhere. It's good to know, isn't it? Chapter 1, Organizing Chaos. We only need to know through the first 3 chapters, which I'll read for you now. So Chapter 1. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. Our invisible governors are, in many cases, unaware of the identity of their fellow members in the inner cabinet. Pretty incredible stuff. I hope that somebody out there is hearing this for the first time and is incredulous and saying, what? He said what? Because I was when I first heard this. Now, another resource I can tell you about, I haven't prepared a tab to show it to you, but I might be able to get it open quickly. But another resource is a documentary called The Century of Self. And this was a BBC documentary. I'm going to see if I can find it very quickly. The Century of Self. And I've watched this 4-part documentary, and it talks about Bernays and the way his information was used to control everybody and manipulate everybody and get everybody behaving and doing what he was paid to get them to behave and do. And here it is. It's The Century of Self. It's a 2002 British television documentary by Adam Curtis, focusing on the work of psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud and Anna Freud and PR consultant Edward Bernays. So, Edward Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. In episode 1, Curtis says, this series is about how those in power have used Freud's theories to try and control the dangerous crowd in an age of mass democracy. Fantastic television. It's the kind of thing they don't really make anymore, because a lot of the stuff is vacuous now, and they've really just given up on trying to inform and educate and help people have a good understanding of the world and how it works. So anything like this, which amounts to, the pulling back of the curtain to reveal the little old man, pulling the levers, all this kind of stuff is very, it's all been done in the past. They put it all out there, so you can learn about it if you want to. But they also muddy the water with lots of distracting stuff that is vacuous and unimportant. So Century of the Self, you can go and learn about Edward Bernays, or you can find this PDF for free online. This book, as you can see here, is 150 pages long. You can get it read. And it's 100 years old. So this is this methodology is 100 years old. And you think they haven't been using it for the last 100 years? Of course they have. All right, moving on with the show. Daily Skeptic. This is a headline: no proof face masks ever worked against CV, and they may have made things worse, says UKHSA boss. What is the UKHSA? Well, let's find out. There's no solid proof masks ever slowed down the spread of COVID, and they may have made things worse, England's former Deputy Chief Medical Officer said on Wednesday. I knew this from the start, very early on. Very early on, I could see that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in America, had a statement where they'd carried out like a meta-analysis, which is where you take the findings of hundreds of studies and you combine all the results of those. And the meta-analysis said there was no statistical significance in masking on the transmission of respiratory illness. This has been a fact borne out by the scientific literature for a long, long time. And so this tells me that the mask issue was just one that was used to divide and conquer, because they knew some people would cling on to it, and the symbol of doing the right thing, and the symbol of, because it was a symbol of being a good person, right? But it didn't mean anything. You might as well have just worn yellow socks and then gone around getting angry at people who didn't wear yellow socks and go like, you're not coming in this supermarket until you put yellow socks on, and you're a bad person because you're not wearing yellow socks. Like that's a good metaphor, a good sort of analogy for what these. But you might have felt the rage, how incensed people got and how triggered they got when they had to walk past people who were not wearing yellow socks. I had people step off the pavement into the road to avoid walking past me. People would rather take their chances with cars and buses and vans and lorries than walk past me in the fresh air outdoors on a pavement, as we call them in the UK, sidewalk to any Americans who are listening out there. So, and I knew this very early on because I read widely and deeply, and I listened to people who had integrity and excellence and who looked at the evidence and the information and the available knowledge that had been established by mainstream sources, like I mentioned, the CDC. So I knew very early on that these little bits of cloth did absolutely nothing, and in fact may have made things worse, as it is now being revealed, because this was revealed and talked about and known about back when lockdowns were in full swing. Within lockdown 1, I knew this information, but people who talked about it publicly on the mainstream media platforms and the big tech platforms were silenced. They were cancelled. They were removed. I watched it happen in real time. Whole channels deleted, massive amounts of followers, millions of views, gone, because they were telling you the truth. But now it's okay to say it, because now it's not happening anymore, and they've achieved what they wanted to achieve with this whole event. So now it's okay to talk about it. So Professor Dame Jenny Harries, who now heads up the UK Health Security Agency, said the evidence that coverings reduce transmission, and they changed the word to coverings, right? They're masks. That's what they are. What are masks historically used for? Well, they're used on prisoners and slaves. That is the deep historic use for masks. Said the evidence that masks reduce transmission is uncertain. Pieces of cloth are ineffective. They give you a false sense of security. So that's basically, she's coming out and saying it now after all this time, when I've known about it and other people have known about it for many years at this point, and they were kicked off line and were told that they couldn't say that stuff by companies like Moderna, who were spying and trying to quash anybody dissenting, and by the UK government and its military 77th Brigade, spying on people and manipulating them and trying to shut them down for causing hesitancy and doubt, when actually the thing causing hesitancy and doubt was the narrative itself, because it was so stupid and so full of holes and didn't make any sense. So here's a link to this Dame Jenny Harries, the quote, the video that was recorded. I'm not going to play it now, but she admits that masking is not evidence-based. She admits advice to public on making masks was ineffective, and implies masking was making things worse. But the public were forced to do it by law. So masking didn't make things worse in terms of false sense of security, putting more people at risk from catching some alleged virus and getting a disease. It made things worse because it divided people and it drummed up the fear. So everybody walking around with one of these things on their face was basically carrying a flag saying, I'm fearful and I'm scared and I believe what my television tells me to believe, and I don't question it, and I don't read widely, and I don't have any access to good quality alternative sources of information from people who practice journalism with excellence and integrity. It was just be fearful, and I want you to be fearful with me so we can all be scared cowards together. That's what they were all about. Okay, so what else did our loving white-coated leaders do to us? And this is a headline about COVID having a devastating impact on our children's social skills. We will see the effects for years. And excuse me a second, I gotta blow my nose once more. This kind of thing really gets on my nerves, because they've put COVID had a devastating impact. No, it didn't. No, it did not. Right? One, what is COVID? What is it? Are you talking about lockdowns? Are you talking about the series of measures rolled out across the world globally by our governments? Yes, that is what this article. That's what had a devastating impact, not COVID. What even is it? Has it been proven to exist? Are you sure, or are you just assuming that it has? I would look into that if I was you. Raging debate on either side what viruses even are, whether they exist as we have been told. You know, I mean, the first question you got to ask with a virus is, okay, so it's a piece of dead matter. It's not alive. It's not a living thing. It's not an organism. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't, it's an inert, dead thing but it reproduces itself. So, what else is that? What other examples of dead things that don't, that reproduce themselves? Rocks. I don't know. That's so there's a contradiction right there in the official narrative of what viruses are. But anyway, back to the article. Just with that caveat that no, it wasn't COVID that had a devastating impact. It was our governments and the people who are sitting in our governments who had a devastating impact, and the people and because they listen to people in white coats because they follow the white lab coats. But now our children are wrecked, and it's going to take years for them to catch up because they've missed out on so much human interaction. And there's a story at the beginning of a lady who watched her son trying to do football training over Zoom, which is a very depressing thing to think of and sad. And her daughter Zoe, who has had issues with friendships, and has been mean to one of her friends, which is out of character. It's worse than that, right? So a 2022 study found that 86% of school leaders had seen an increase in low self-esteem, and 76% had seen an increase in depression among their pupils. We've seen that children are less emotionally developed than we would have expected them to be. We are seeing behaviors in year 6 that we would have previously expected in year 4. This is a head teacher. We've had to do much more around friendship building and ensuring children can interact with one another and take turns. Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing because it's so obvious. And again, I was saying this into the first lockdown. Children are being ruined. You can't leave them at home, plonk them in front of a screen and expect them to learn anything and grow up to be able to interact with other human beings. But that is the plan, right? The plan is to not have any, to minimize human face-to-face interaction. Get everyone sitting at home, talking into a microphone and a screen and a camera like I'm doing right now, and have them all cut off from each other, right? Pubs are all closing down. You can't go anywhere to meet and get that energy and be part of that collective field of experience, the buzz that you get from a crowd and the excitement you get from being out. You can't go down the pub, discuss things that are going on, talk about, this is a bit weird, and and exchange ideas and coordinate any kind of movement or community. That has all been destabilized and ruined under the guises of protecting you from a alleged virus, which may or may not exist, that pretty much everyone survived. Like, everyone survived it. And as we'll see later in the show, and this is lasting way too long, so I've got to pick up the pace a bit, but as we're going to see, the deaths didn't start happening till much later. But anyway, the children have been absolutely wrecked. Repeated studies have shown that children who were already disadvantaged fared worse during lockdown. So this disproportionately impacted children from poorer backgrounds, from lower means. If you were in a high-rise building, for example, if you didn't have a garden to play in, if you didn't live near nature, if you were in a city and you were locked down in a little flat with your brothers and sisters and your parents, it would have been hell. I can't imagine what it was like. I was fortunate enough when lockdowns happened to have a big garden and be in a place that was quite rural and had lots of nature around me. So I had a freedom and I could breathe. But being stuck in the city centre and being forced to sit at home, when you're a child, you have energy. You need social contact. You need to see the faces of other people. You're learning. You're growing. Your brain is being programmed with the information that is going to carry along through the rest of your life and impact your decision making and your behaviour for the rest of your life. That was attacked, and it wasn't attacked accidentally. There's no way that the people who did this to us did it. Oh, we didn't see this happening. Oops. I mean, go back to Benet's book, Propaganda, 100 years ago. The whole thing, the outcomes were known. It were obvious. If you'd have got any person, sat them down and said, all right, we're gonna lock everybody down for 2 years. We're going to continuously bombard them through their televisions with scary graphs and numbers and messages from people and actors and well-known public figures that we're gonna pump them full of fear every single day for 2 years. What do you think what kind of impact is that gonna have on people? And obviously this would have been known, and it's so clear. Maybe the benefit of hindsight, nobody knew. Everyone was just scrambling to deal with. No, I knew within 6 months of the thing starting, And some people knew sooner than that, but I knew within 6 months because I was doing my best to catch up and keep informed. But I knew within 6 months that the whole thing was bogus. And they still kept it going and dragged it out and pulled it out and dragged it out for as long as they did. Why? Because most people weren't aggressively and obsessively hoovering up information like I was. That is why. If more people were doing that, or had access to good information, or weren't targeted by 100-year-old methods of propaganda and psychological manipulation and abuse, that was actually the real challenge, is everyone was being psychologically abused constantly. And as I said, the two groups that were disproportionately affected were the young people and the old people. The two groups of people in our society that are supposed to be protected and looked after by the adults, they're the ones who've fared the worst. And this is what this article is saying, that it's going to take, there's been a tenfold rise in referrals to a CBT therapist. So they're suffering brain damage because the interactions that we grow up influence how the brain develops. And if you don't have that face-to-face interaction, you don't have that physical contact, you don't have that rough and tumble playing, then your brain doesn't develop properly. So now we have a whole generation of children suffering brain damage. This just makes me sick and angry. And then the end of this article talks about a bit of uplifting news, which is this charity called Go Beyond. And this is about, this groundbreaking, amazing revelation that if you take children out of a classroom and you take them outside and you get them doing things outdoors and you give them physical and demanding challenges, they enjoy it and they thrive and they benefit from it. Shock. Absolute shocking news. Unbelievable, right? Turns out if you just sit at home staring at your screens and your social media and your Xbox and your TV, that you feel crap and you feel terrible and you feel depressed and anxious and fearful and you get brain damage, right? So I know it's a bit cynical. It's really great that they've got this charity and they're doing it, but it shouldn't take a charity to do this. It should take, like, adults turn off the screens and disconnect from that addictive drip of information and go out and do stuff with people. Take your family outside, take your children outside, go I don't know, hike up a hill, or go foraging in the woods or something like that, right? Because we're getting boxed in rapidly. So that's the end of this article is talking about this charity, and they're saying they're taking in children, taking them outdoors and giving them that sense of fulfillment and excitement and adventure that they so need and they so benefit from. So good on them for doing that. Another article here from the New York Times, the startling evidence on learning loss is in. So during the pandemic, Congress sent $190 billion to schools, stipulating that 20% of the funds had to be used for reversing learning setbacks. Yeah, just throw money at it. This article kind of wound me up as well, because they conclude in this article that the solution is more school. So in order for our students to catch up on what they've missed, they need to be in school more often, right? I completely disagree. I think that this charity here in the previous article has it right. The children need to be outdoors more often. They need to be doing real things in the real world. They need to be learning real world skills about how to paint a wall, or how to cook a meal, how to repair something around the house, how to work on a car, how to change a tire, all these actual real world, real life skills that children don't get taught anymore. I'm always joking with my dad, I missed that bit in school, because they don't tell you anything useful in school. Schooling is indoctrination. Schooling is part of Edward Bernays' lessons. If we go back here, here we go. Chapter 8, Propaganda for Education. That is what it is. Schooling is a propaganda delivery mechanism which is enforced on young people, and it's the adults who allow it to be enforced on the young people, right? And so this article wound me up, and it's just kind of like we need more money, which is obviously going to be taken from taxpayers, and we need to
put children in school for longer because absenteeism is going up. And the Center for Disease Control did a survey that says 40% of high school students had persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. 22% had seriously considered suicide, and 10% reported that they had attempted. That's just a heartbreaking tragedy for young people to be going through that, and it's because they are neglected and they're not being cared for, and then they don't have good information. They don't have upstanding moral adults to care for them and nurture them and lead them through this maze of craziness that is the modern world with its internet and its technology and its advanced propaganda techniques and brainwashing techniques that go back 100 years to Edward Bernays. But anyway, that's another article. And this is the thing that stood out to me. It is magical thinking to expect they will make improvements happen without a major increase in instructional time. Bogus, bullshit, bollocks. They don't need more time in school. They need more time in actual reality, doing real world things with adults who love and care for them and look after them and want to see them thrive. Another article here about longer school closures linked to youth suicidality. More heartbreaking stuff. It is pretty grim reading, but it hammers the point home what is going on and the problem that we're facing. All right, so back to how this was done and how this went so unchallenged. So we've got Edward Bernays on the record and his book Propaganda. This article, back to the Daily Skeptic, is telling us that the federal government paid media outlets to promote the injections. Oh, well, that sounds fair and open and transparent and honest, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. So this writer here makes a good point straight off the bat. More than anything else, a publication should be pro-truth, whether that means highlighting the astounding benefits of a therapeutic or exposing its serious side effects. The idea that a whole media corporation would take a firm stance on a novel, experimental product is antithetical to the core purpose of journalism. Exactly right on the money there. As it turns out, mainstream media's nearly monolithic coverage of mRNA vaccines and other COVID measures can be at least partially explained by a clear financial interests. Yeah, massive amounts of funding, massive amounts of resources and energy poured into the messaging, poured into the advertising campaign, and into rooting out and deplatforming and silencing anybody who offered any counter narrative or counter questioning. That is how it was done. Hundreds of news organizations were paid by the federal government to advertise for the injections as part of a comprehensive media campaign, according to documents the Blaze obtained from the Department of Health and Human Services. The Biden administration purchased ads on TV, radio, in print, and on social media to build injection confidence, timing this effort with the increasing availability of the injections. So that was how it was done. It's not because the product was excellent and had integrity and was stood on its own merits. No, it had to be advertised. What was that other product that we were just learning about that also? Oh, cigarettes. Yeah, and that turned out well for everybody, didn't it? Cigarettes also had massive amounts of funding and advertising to get them out there and get people on them and get people using them. And there's no health benefit. I mean, nicotine actually does have some health benefits, but you can extract it and get it other ways. You don't have to also take in the chemicals and the smoke and the noxious kind of gases and fumes that are added to tobacco in the production of mass-produced cigarettes. But people are doing it, people are smoking it, people are hooked on it, and people will kill themselves with it because of the psychological manipulation propaganda techniques funded and deployed on a mass scale. And Edward Bernays is actually credited with getting women smoking in America, because it didn't used to be a thing that women did. And he was approached, and he was like, look, we've only got half the market here. We've only got the men smoking. How do we get the other half of the market smoking? How do we get the women smoking too? And he came up with a pretty ingenious solution for that, which you can look up. I won't tell you about it right now. We got to move on. So, yeah, this is an example of Los Angeles Times and the kind of thing that was put up. So this was a headline they pushed: mocking anti-vaxxers, COVID deaths is ghoulish, yes, but it may be necessary. So they were pushing the gloating of the death and suffering of people, but it's necessary to mock people dying and laughing at it. And every death from the alleged virus is a catastrophic tragedy that we need to fight against and rally against and unite against and prevent. But if these people over here who didn't want the injections, if they die, well, we got to mock it. It's probably a good idea to mock it. Just staggering hypocrisy and double standards and incoherent, illogical nonsense. So the article goes on to tell us about some of the advertisements that were used. One advertisement promotes COVID injections in children, featuring a montage of selected medical doctors. And there's a new government ad on the HHS website now, which promotes the updated injection. It falsely claims the new booster shot prevents long COVID and hospitalization, when the only available evidence from Pfizer on Moderna are rat studies and a 50-person trial, with an unexplained 2% rate of serious adverse events. So, come on, let's just pay attention, put our thinking hats on. So another article here from Substack, the New Zealand vaccine data, what I actually saw and analyzed and what the limitations are. So if you actually want to look at the alternative, not even alternative, but just have a higher resolution picture, put more data points into your map of reality, this is a really good one to have on your radar, the data. So I won't go into it too much here, but very quickly, there's a group of people, 2.2 million people had received 4 million doses. And it tells us an average population would have 800 deaths per 100,000 person years. So that's 1 year of human life. This population is more elderly, so we'll call it 900 deaths per 100,000 person years. Well, injected people will die on average about 10% higher than normal. So that's 990 deaths per 100,000 person years. The numbers of this study are 1,009 deaths per person year, which is 1.9% higher. So this is just an explanation of how the data in this study is not biased, and what they're finding is that there's a higher incidence of death among the people who are getting injections. Another report from the Defender, Children's Health Defense News and Views. New report, young people dying of cancer at explosive rates, UK government data show. So not only are our young people brain damaged because they've been kept out of schools and forced to stare at screens and sit in their chairs and be bored out of their minds and not have access to actual reality, they're also dying of cancer at explosive rates, according to the UK's own data. This is an unprecedented increase in cancer deaths among 15 to 44-year-olds. And this is a new report by data analyst Edward Dowd. Teenagers and young people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s in the UK are dying from rapidly metastasizing and terminal cancers at an unprecedented rate since the injections began. And this is the UK's Office for National Statistics. Now, unless you think that the UK's Office for National Statistics are conspiracy theorists who are trying to promote vaccine hesitancy, I mean, this group should actually be shut down for promoting vaccine hesitancy, right? According to their own techniques of controlling the narrative. Pretty scary stuff here. Dowd said his research team noticed a striking pattern. While almost all deaths among older people in 21 and 22 had been coded. Coded means they've given a cause of death. It means they've a coroner has, or a doctor has said they know what caused it. So almost all were coded. 8% of deaths among 15 to 44-year-olds in 2021, and 30% in that age group in 2022 had not yet been coded. So when a young person dies at the wheel of a car, walking down the street, or in their sleep, there's an investigation that consumes time to assign the cause of death. And it's a highly statistically significant extreme event. And so what is the conclusion of all this? Well, a 28% rise in fatal breast cancer rates in women, 80% increase in pancreatic cancer deaths among women, and 60% increase among men. 55% increase among men in colon cancer deaths and 41% in women. 120% increase in fatal melanomas among men and a 35% in women. This is, and then, yeah, so just have a look at this graph. This is the UK's data. So these are all different kinds of cancers. These are the rates in 2020, early 2020, before any injections were rolled out. 2021, the injections were starting to be rolled out. 2022, rollout pretty much complete, and look at what is going on now. And this is really sickening and upsetting. Surveying the capture of national and state government regulatory agencies and corporate media by big pharma and other global interests, he realized we needed independent agents to act as gatekeepers of the public interest. So this is talking about Dowd, and he realizes that our governments have been captured by corporate big pharma interests and other globalist interests. Absolutely true. So he's trying to give a statistical analysis of the population level and establish a baseline. So he first established a baseline of normal cancer death rates that was remarkably consistent until the cancer death rates rose significantly in late 2021 in the UK following the injection rollout. So pretty alarming stuff. We are seeing 2 or 3 times the normal rate of cancer, an estimated more than 5.5 billion people, or 72.3% of the global population received the injections. And people heard the word vaccine and they assumed that they know what a vaccine is, and there's so many vaccines that that we could just go along and get it without looking at it. But this one was actually a completely new and novel technology that had never been approved. No product using this technology had ever passed safety testing and been brought to market. But because it was an emergency, they just decided to roll it out and basically just test it on billions and billions of people across the world. Now look what is happening to our young people. Another report, but instead this time that this in Germany, this report was speaking about this turbo cancer issue, but the report itself was then withdrawn from the press and buried, and presumably not fit for the public's consumption because it might make people hesitant. So that's just another story there about how really we're facing quite a bit of censorship still. And it's nothing like it was. You are allowed to talk about these things now, but it's too effing late now, isn't it? It's too effing late now when so many people have already had these things, these products injected into them. It is really scary. So here's another article. But this time, they're still trying to keep this from people. They're still trying to get in the way of people learning about what is going on. And that's just unforgivable. And then we got another issue here with the MHRA here in the UK not following up half of injection death reports. So this is Nick Hunt, and he asked the MHRA for some data, and he was refused, saying it would take too long. But he did say that he did get some information back, which was this: during the time period, the MHRA received over 22,000 suspected adverse events reports directly to the yellow card scheme associated with the COVID injections. Of these reports, 118 included a fatal outcome and 17,500 were considered serious. So he's been skeptical all along about the benefits and risks of the injections, but the MHRA is saying that in that 2-month period, a staggering 1 in 186 of the yellow cards reported a death, and 80% of them reported a serious adverse event. And a little more data analysis here about why this is good data, not good data. It's not a good thing, but why it's solid data and it is worth paying attention. And this writer is a senior civil servant in the Ministry of Defense. And it also says down here that he's the co-author of the Perseus Group report. So the Perseus Group report is here. You can read it for free. And this is an assessment of the MHRA's regulatory failures. So what is the MHRA? Well, it is the medicine regulator here in the UK. And this report has been produced about how they are not any good at their job. So the report's findings about systemic failures in MHRA's regulation of medicines relate principally to the fact that it does not follow any of the safety management processes that exist in other safety critical sectors. And so there are all the reasons there. It's not investigating all the problems that are reported by its own reporting system. It's not assessing the likelihood of causation. There's no delegation to individuals of safety, responsibility, and accountability. There's been no safety audits of MHRA. So it's not fit for purpose, is what it says. But, get in there and read the whole report. But very alarming that our own regulatory agency is captured and it's not doing its job properly. It is just there for show. It's like a shop. It's like a movie set. You walk down the movie set and you go, oh, this pub or this shop looks nice. You go through the door and you find out that it's just a big wooden cardboard cutout, and there's actually no shop in there. There's no premises or property or business in there. That's what this MHRA thing is. So if you think they're going to protect you, then think again. So we're getting towards the end of the show now. This is the power of silence. Validation, empty space. This is the forest of the fallen, and how it has grown to 131 powerful displays. So the stories sway in the wind, each one a person killed or injured by the injection gene vaccines. The forest of the fallen is the exact opposite of a protest. And so there's a video here which I think I will play because that just gets the point across better. But each one of these is the story of somebody who's been killed or maimed or harmed. In your hopes and dreams, in your memories, in the songs we sing, in the ones we leave, we carry on. But no one is ever gone. No one is ever gone. No one is ever gone. In your hopes and dreams, in your memories, no one is ever gone. I'll turn that music off and I'll come back and speak. Sorry if I blasted you there with the volume. I tried to get it under control quickly, so hopefully that didn't cause too much shock. But yeah, this is just heartbreaking stuff. All of these stories for people to walk around and look at and read, just to raise awareness, because this is not being told to us in the mainstream news. And so we have to look elsewhere to get actual information about the fallout and the effects. And there's a website there you can go to if you want to have a look more of that. All right. So I did tell you that I had some books to recommend. And I haven't got these up on screen or in tabs to look at. So I'm just going to have to do the classic thing and hold them up to the camera. But one, this is all about... so this is Bad Pharma, How Medicine is Broken and How We Can Fix It by Ben Goldacre. This was a Sunday Times bestseller, as you can see right there. And pretty big book, pretty thick. It's got a lot of detail. But this is, the Daily Telegraph said, this is a book to make you enraged, properly bone-shakingly furious, a work of brilliance. This is a book that deserves to be widely read because anyone who does read it cannot help feeling both uncomfortable and angry. So that is one that can help you understand what's going on with this push for us to follow the white lab coats and why we might not want to do that. Another one I think is extremely important to put on the record is The Rockefeller Medicine Men. This is Medicine and Capitalism in America by Richard E. Brown. Rockefellers and the Rockefeller dynasty and their foundation have a huge influence on the modern allopathic medical system, and this sort of germ theory based model of treating symptoms. Of course, what it is not designed to do is to get to the root cause of health issues and heal and cure people. That is not what this medical system is designed to do. It's designed to manage symptoms in perpetuity, because if you can keep somebody needing your system, your symptom management for the rest of their lives, then you're going to make a lot of money, right? It's a kind of subscription-based model. Another one I think is worth highlighting is this one, which is Dissolving Illusions, Disease, Vaccines, and the Forgotten History by Suzanne Humphreys, MD, and Roman Bystrianic. So this is another really dense book. And I just thought of one over there on the shelf as well that I have left out that I should include. But this is packed with data and information and references. Quick glance here. It's got over 800 footnotes and references. Okay, so that is impressive, rigorous writing and research to dive into and to get a better sense of the true bigger picture of healthcare and science, and what it is and how it should be done, because a large part of the problem is that it's presented to us as this faith-based monolith of knowledge and truth and integrity, when there's all sorts of conflicts of interests and money getting pumped in and predetermined outcomes being generated to serve the agendas of people who you don't know, and they don't know you, and they don't care about you or your children and your future. They just care about themselves and the profit and the security and the power that they can get. And these are all part of the system that they employ against you so that they can continue to maintain that power differential and that knowledge gap. So the next thing I wanted to put on your radar, and we've got two more things and then we are done, is this trailer, which is for a film that was released, I think, earlier this month, and it's called Gods of Their Own Religion. And this trailer is this was an independent film inspired by lockdowns, dystopian type of futuristic film. But I think I haven't seen it yet, but I thought the trailer was so powerful, and this was done with no budget, no mainstream support. And they were breaking rules to film it, and it looks really good. It looks very engaging and interesting. And so I'm just going to mute myself, and we'll have a look at this.
If you love me, you'll keep your distance. There's no room for us in the new abnormal. It's time to meet him.
Our world has been based on a willingness to sacrifice the individual in furtherance of the communal good. The rights of the individual are no longer sacrosanct. Rather, they may be subverted for the betterment of society. There is a small a dangerous movement of denialism. We cannot have these toxic biohazards roaming around the planet freely. They must be rounded up and shunted from polite society. Only then will it be safe to take a dip in the ocean or a walk in the woods.
We are now the hunted.
Yeah, look at that. Powerful stuff, right? Very exciting, very interesting. I'm really keen to get my hands on a copy of that and check it out because, like they say in the trailer there, it's about subjugating the individual for the common good. It's communitarianism, in other words, and nothing can convey that more clearly and unambiguously than wearing masks and covering up your face, and that is the most powerful symbol of covering up your individuality and your identity and making yourself faceless and making yourself one of the herd, the tribe. And there's nothing wrong with identifying with a wider group of people and finding common cultural behaviors and traditions and establishing norms. But that's not what this was about. This was more about pushing down the human spirit and pushing down the rights of the individual, controlling them and you know, removing them slowly, deconstructing them, dismantling them. That's the word I'm looking for. Dismantling the rights of the individual in the name of something, the greater good, the higher cause, right? When people who looked and really closely scrutinized this event and the mainstream narrative and the message being pushed and promoted and projected into our consciousness via our TVs, it was quite clear that there were so many holes in it, and it was illogical and it didn't make sense. And the only explanation that did make sense of what was going on was that the whole thing was designed to maximize fear, insecurity, and a sense of struggle. None of what was done came from a place of love and care and compassion. It was all propaganda in the Bernaysian tradition to get people to behave a certain way, to wear masks, to queue up, stand on the dots on the floor, to walk in a certain order, to stay away from each other, to not hug, to not kiss, to not meet, to not gather, to not ask questions and discuss and analyze and build community. All of that was under attack, and they did such a successful job on the young people that it's going to take, unless we kind of unite and come together and build an alternative solution, they're just going to keep going at the children by forcing them to endure even more schooling. And schooling is a topic I'll have to talk about in another episode. But it's a really important one. So let's get to the end of today's episode. The last thing I wanted to tell you about is Ian Davis. So I mentioned that there was Matt Hancock released a book, and I said, don't read that because it's crap, probably. his it's very important for lies and liars to stick with what they've said. And they're more, if they don't get caught out in the moment, then they have to reiterate it and repeat it and reinforce it in the future, and make and rewrite the past so that it aligns with that lie. And that's what's being done by people like Matt Hancock and the books that they're putting out. I would suggest, as an alternative, you can go and check out Ian Davis. He is a UK investigative journalist, and he lives down in the south, I believe. And he is making lots of appearances on podcasts. You can see here he's talking to Jeremy Nell on Germ Warfare, great show. Geopolitics and Empire, another great show. He's writing long, detailed articles about deconstructing the effort to discredit independent researchers. They're extremely good as well, well written. And he is also, on top of all that, an author, and he's written a bunch of books. And the one that I wanted to put on your radar today is this one that you can see over on the right here. If I just click that and bring it up. Pseudo-Pandemic, The New Normal Technocracy. It's here. I've got a copy. It's a really, really wonderfully designed book. And it was published not long after this whole shit show. Actually, it was published during 2021. So if you want to get a better account and understanding of what was happening at that time, don't go out and give any more money to Matt Hancock, who probably paid someone else to write it. Support and check out Ian Davis. You can buy it, the book in paperback, and you can give him a bit of support there, and he'll send it to you. The other way to get it, if I'm not mistaken, is you get it for free if you subscribe to his email list. So if you just give him your email address, he can keep you updated and informed and educated about where he is, what he's doing, what he's working on. He'll give you a free copy of this book. And that will give you a much better insight into the parts of the story that weren't covered in the mainstream. The stuff that was going on in the alternative community, where creators and voices were sidelined and deplatformed and defunded and debanked. We know all that stuff's going on. We covered that last week. And it has been going on for a much longer time as well. It did not start with Nigel Farage. It's been going on for 3 years at least. And people who have been critical and been outspoken and been asking questions to try and educate and help and inform the public, they've been just wiped off the face of the internet in many cases. You got to go to different places. You're not going to find them on your YouTube, your Facebook. It's changing a little bit on Twitter because Musk is bringing some people back, but he's not bringing everyone back. There's still loads of people banned from Twitter, not getting their accounts reinstated, who's still shadow banned. So what is the conclusion and the point that I'm trying to make? It is that the mainstream media, as we've seen today, is funded and controlled by massive corporate interests. They don't care about you. All they care about is getting you painfully hooked and addicted and dependent and on their products and services, and subservient to their products and services. And this is not for your benefit. It's not for your health. It's not for your wellness and your well-being. But there are people out there doing good work, and there are people out there who are asking the right questions, trying to bring good information and good analysis and good knowledge to people, such as Ian Davis. If you want to learn more, I mentioned 3 books earlier on. They are good places to get up to speed on the reality of this whole machine that we're living in. And the last thing I wanted to leave you with was a bit of comedy, a clip that I came across today. I think I can play this. I don't think I'll get struck. It's for copyright strike, but let's find out. This is from an American TV show. I think it just summarizes really well the topic that we've been trying to explore today, which is follow the white lab coats, and that is all about having faith in scientism. It's like a religion. Think of it like a religion, right? If somebody came to you, if the priest came to you and said, God has told me that you have to wear yellow socks, and you have to stand 3.7 meters away from people, and you can only breathe through your left nostril, and you must let us put some magic mushroom paste into your rectum, and that's going to save you from getting ill, you would say, piss off. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. And then he would say, but God told me to tell you that. And you would just be rightfully skeptical. You would be incredulous, and you would demand a lot of more information, right? And it's the same thing, right? A bunch of people in white lab coats, they come, or public figures, they come to you and they say, the people in the white lab coats, the science has told us to tell you to wrap your face in cloth, to step out into don't walk past anyone who isn't whose face you can see, stand so many meters apart, accept this injection into your body, and do all these other crazy things. But because it's a religion and it's a faith-based thing, so many people just said yes, sir, without questioning it. They had faith and belief in and following, and it was a religious response. It was leveraging the humans' willingness to believe and to act on faith, which is a totally human, natural, because we can't know everything. We can't study everything, can we? But you have to always be very skeptical of people who come up to you and say, you have to believe this on faith and do it on faith and don't worry about the detail. Because what are the odds that they have your best interests at heart? Like, really? And this is about being an adult. It's about learning and discerning for yourself what is actual and factual. And not a lot of people want to do that. A lot of people want to stay childish in perpetual adolescence and extended adolescence and dependent on mummy and daddy government and their magical men and women in white lab coats who can interpret the science, TM, and the big numbers and the graphs and things like that. So hopefully I have empowered you with some more perspectives and information and resources to explore and look at and consider and contemplate. I apologize I haven't brought the usual energy and enthusiasm and humor that I would like to bring, but I'm a little bit under the weather. And hopefully this was still useful for you at some point in some way. I'm just going to do one final thing down here, hopefully. So the last thing I want to do before I play you out or play us out with this comedy clip is I just want to draw your attention to my YouTube channel. And the reason I want to draw your attention to my YouTube channel, I mean, you should already know about it because the chances are you're on it right now, unless I've started publishing somewhere else in the future and you're, watching this then. But my YouTube channel has my book reviews on the main video page here, which I'll be doing more of very soon. I've made an investment. I've got a new bit of kit, which is going to make my book reviews even better. Not that they were particularly good, but they're going to be better than they were. They're going to be a lot more useful to people. So I'm going to be making more of those very soon. But on the live tab here is where I do these shows. And if you click into the video and look underneath, we'll take this one as an example. This is my last episode. You can have a look here in the links box, and you can check out affiliate links for Autonomy, which is Richard Grove's 12-week life improvement course, which is all based on ethical behavior, advertising and marketing practices, building businesses, because entrepreneurism and freedom is really closely linked. We need people who act with integrity and from an ethical place to provide products and services that people can use to make their lives better, because as we've seen today, the establishment is not particularly concerned with ethics and integrity. So if that sounds interesting, you can learn more about it here for free by just clicking some of these links, whichever one stands out to you. Tons of useful resources here. You could make huge changes and huge strides forwards in your life by just soaking up all this free stuff. Lower down, here's some paid courses, but this is about forming communities, doing objective research, using logic so you can identify propaganda and you can identify incoherent nonsense when it is presented to you through the telebox and the telescreens. And there's also a course here about Philosophy 101 by Jay Dyer. This is learning how to think and learning what the kind of history is, because philosophy, as Jay explains, is just a conversation that goes on over a long time. And what you notice is a lot of arguments that pop up and ideas and theories, they've already been dealt with in the past. They've already been put to bed by philosophers long ago, because, you know, back in the day, before televisions and PlayStations and things, all people did was stand around and talk about the things that are, what's going on, where are we, how did we get here, what's the structure of reality, is there a God, is this a simulation? That's the thing that blew my mind in this course. I learned that simulation theory is not a new thing. And this goes back to ancient Greece. They were talking about simulation theory, right? So, incredible course. Jay Dyer, he's hilarious. Not only is he hilarious, he's exceptionally well read, and he knows his stuff inside out. So, wonderful course to get the history of knowledge and how we know things, and the ideas that have come before, the ones that have been successfully dismantled, deconstructed, and put to bed and abandoned, rightfully so. These are affiliate links, so I may receive a commission if you go forward with any purchases on any of these things, but I wholeheartedly 100% recommend them. And I wouldn't be here doing this. I wouldn't have the confidence, I wouldn't have any of the skills, and I wouldn't have the belief in what I'm doing if it wasn't for these people and these creators and what they do, right? So there's that. Finally, there's 3 links here. You can support me with by buying me a coffee. You can follow me on Instagram, where I post pictures of books and quotes and things that I think are relevant to understanding the big picture. And I also have a Telegram group, and this is just for announcements of when I'm going live, so that people can be aware of that and check it out. Okay, last but not by no means least, short clip, but I think kind of a giggle, something funny to end this on. Be discerning and don't just believe anyone because they have a white lab coat. You know, you probably, in many cases, wouldn't just believe someone because they were a priest or some sort of religious figure, right? You would want to question and interrogate the things they're saying. It's the same with science and scientism. Ask questions, question everything, and stay vigilant. And I just actually realized that is exactly what Ryan Christian of Last American Vagabond says at the end of his shows, but it's so true that I'm going to nick it unashamedly. Thank you, Ryan. I love what you do. You should go and check him out if you like what I do. All right, let's play this out, and I shall see you again.
Look, you're wasting our time. You're not going to get us to not believe in evolution.
And why is that?
Because the smartest scientists in the entire world all agree that it's real.
I'm glad you brought that up. Because, Mr. Reynolds, science is a liar sometimes.
Oh, boy.
This is Aristotle, thought to be the smartest man on the planet. He believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and everybody believed him because he was so smart. Until another smartest guy came around, Galileo, and he disproved that theory, making Aristotle and everybody else on Earth look like a bitch. Of course, Galileo then thought comets were an optical illusion, and there's no way that the moon could cause the ocean's tides. Everybody believed that because he was so smart. He was also wrong, making him and everyone else on Earth look like a bitch again. And then, best of all, Sir Isaac Newton gets born and blows everybody's nips off with his big brains. Of course, he also thought he could turn metal into gold and died eating mercury, making him yet another stupid bitch. Are you seeing a pattern?
No.
Mr. Reynolds, these were all the smartest scientists on the planet. Only problem is, they kept being wrong. Sometimes.
Oh, this is insane, you fool!
I'm a fool because I have more faith in the saints that wrote the Bible?
Yeah, because you just read the words of a bunch of guys that you never met, and you just take it on faith that everything they wrote was true.
And what makes you think what your scientists are writing is any more truer than my saints?
Because there are volumes of proven data, numbers, figures. There are fossil records.
Oh, fossil records. I didn't even think about the fossil records. I guess I'll concede. Oh, wait, well, one more thing before I do, Mr. Reynolds. Have you seen these fossil records?
Huh?
Have you poured through the data yourself? The numbers, the figures?
Well, no. No.
Oh, interesting. So let me get this straight, Mr. Reynolds. You get your information from a book written by men you've never met. And you take their words as truth based on a willingness to believe, a desire to accept, a leap of, dare I say it, faith?
Come on. Look, I mean, I don't even know how I'm supposed to respond to that. Like, come on. That's a false equivalency.
Just answer the question, Mr. Reynolds.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I rest my case.
Well, that got me. Yeah.
Frank, you want me to?
Let me go.
Yeah, all right. Well, we're going to the fence. I mean, that's a shadow of a doubt.
You actually don't believe in evolution anymore?
I don't know. He created a reasonable doubt. He makes you sound like a stupid science bitch.
That's the thing. Oh, my God.
All right, so I think that gets the point across nicely. You got to be careful where you put your faith and your belief, and what you believe in and what you take on faith, right? Especially in this day and age, we are swimming in information. We are surrounded by books. We have access to the legacy of the people who came before us and all the discussions and the debates that they had, which were on a lot of the topics and the conversations that we're having today. And then when you start to engage with this body of information and knowledge, you can see that the topics come back up and they're used to divide and get people arguing against each other. And in many cases, each side is ill-equipped with the ability to reason, to put an argument out, to debate. These things used to be taught in school. There used to be a classical mode of knowledge and learning, the trivium and the quadrivium. Now that's been taken out of school, and that's not what schooling's there for. Schooling is there to indoctrinate people, to give you emotional response to certain things. So when you see this thing, you got to feel this way. And that just keeps people disempowered, and it keeps people really not making much headway or making much progress in life. So that is it. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me that anyone checks these videos out and has a look. I hope it was useful. I'm going to be back. When am I going to be back? Friday. I'll be back on Friday. I've got another episode for Friday morning. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll just have to show up and check it out then. All right. Thank you very much for being here. Take care. And I will see you all very soon at the next one.